Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Wow, what a great interview last night was. I'm really happy with it. And I am excited about the next time we have Victor back. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, and the links to those books are in the description as well. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first part of the upload. Hello everyone, my name is Terry. I'm retired from the U.S. Navy. I'm currently working for a high-speed data management company in California. I have a degree in business administration. I'm about to tell you 2 encounters I had. My first encounter was in 1982. My girlfriend and I were driving back from our high school senior prom, Georgia, Chattahoochee River border, Chavala High School. Our high school is 37 miles downriver, way out in the sticks. As we were driving back home, we came to a 2-mile flat section of road that had a slippery when wet sign about halfway on the right. Because we were tired and sober, and both awake, the reflection from the sign caught our attention. As we came closer to the sign, something moved or reflected, catching our attention. About 100 feet away as we approached, with our car lights fully beaming, we saw this massive, black, hairy creature leaning on the sign. The top of the sign I guessed to be about 10 feet high. Whatever this creature was, all we could see was the top of its chest and down, about 10 feet of creature. We could not see the head. It just stood there. We could see the massive frame and muscles, most in rippling detail, shiny black fur, standing with human intelligence. We sped up, all the while screaming at each other, scared to death. A mile down the road, my left rear tire blew. I drove 7 miles to the first house with a light and called my father to come help us. First, I'll just say without a shadow of a doubt, this was not a hoax. The costume alone would have cost thousands of dollars to create. Second, the people that live in this area are extremely poor. As a matter of fact, the home that we drove up to after the tire blew had light seeping through the cracks in the siding of the house while it sat on cinder blocks. This was an experience I will never forget. My second encounter, my girlfriend, her father, and I were parked on the bank of the Chattahoochee River, Georgia side on Fort Bennington Military Reservation. The military airfield is right across the river. My girlfriend's father was sitting on the hood of the car with his fishing pole in front of him. He was night catfishing. While we sat there, our car lights shining across the river. My girlfriend and I were sitting in the front seat, just making small talk. All of a sudden, I heard the most horribly incredible scream coming from my right side. Our car was parked about 2 feet from the water on the bank. Off to my right, about 60 feet, was where the foliage begins. Very swampy, very thick, and very hard to walk through. About 40 feet up the bank, which can't be seen from our car because of the foliage, is a huge oak tree. I'd have to guess that the tree had to be about 15 feet in circumference. It's just massive. About 10 feet up the tree is a huge branch that went out about 20 feet over the river. When I heard the scream, my body instantly went into what I think was shock. As I turned to my right slowly, all my hair was standing straight up. We heard another sound right away that sounded like a huge branch shaking, like someone jumping off into the water. The splash that came next was equally horrific. All we did was sit there in shock, waiting. I have no idea what we were waiting for, staring straight ahead into the water. We waited and waited for what seemed like hours when all of a sudden a huge black object about 9 feet long or tall floated into view of our headlights and stopped. It must have been a deliberate action since it was floating downstream. We stared at it forever, it seemed, until it opened its eyes. 2 huge balls of red light reflecting off the headlights of our car. It looked at us. I have no idea when my girlfriend's dad got back into the car, but he put that car into reverse and we sped off, extremely terrified. Today's second part of the upload. In 1992, I was backpacking in the Cohuta Wilderness. I came to a flat, grassy meadow at the river crossing that is a popular camping site. When I arrived there, I was alone, so I dropped my pack and tent off at a spot near the water and decided to continue up the trail to see the falls. The trail is narrow and runs along the base of a very steep incline. About half a mile up the trail, I started to hear footsteps on the ridge above me. Thinking that it was probably a deer trying to find a crossing, I stopped and grunted to see what it would do. It stopped, so I walked on. As I walked, I could hear the footsteps in the leaves above me, and I realized that it sounded like a 2-legged gate, not a deer or a bear, but a person. I thought at the time that since it was late October, and there might be a chance that there was a black powder or early season special hunting event scheduled, that it just might be a hunter stalking deer or bear, and that since I was hiking light after having left my pack at the campsite and was walking on the trail quietly, that I may be mistaken for an animal. So I decided to call out several times. I said, "Hey, who's there?" The footsteps stopped during that time, but I could hear twigs, leaves, and grass snapping and creaking like someone was standing and shifting their weight back and forth. I walked on to a section of the trail where the small creek cuts a ravine, causing the ridge above me to angle right and away from the creek. The footsteps did not follow past the ravine, and thinking that I would be better seen and could maybe get a better picture of who was on the ridge in the open near the water, I decided to stop at the creek and just relax a bit. About 20 or 30 minutes later, I could hear what sounded like someone hitting a tree with a baseball bat about 200 or so yards up the ravine. I waited another 10 minutes, but never heard anything else, so I decided to go back to my campsite before sundown. There were 2 couples setting up camp in the meadow when I returned, and I didn't encounter anything else the rest of that weekend. Now, I am an avid hunter, and I've experienced many times the sound that different animals make while walking in the thick brush. I'm 100% convinced that I was followed along that trail by something walking on its hind legs. Something was curious about what I was doing and escorted me along the trail. I can't imagine a hunter being agile enough to keep pace with me on a smooth trail while he had to negotiate the brush on a steep incline. I can't imagine a hunter would want to continue following me, knowing I was not an animal after I called out. At the time, only accounts I'd ever heard about Bigfoot came from the Pacific Northwest, and I didn't associate what I experienced in Georgia with anything like that. Since then, I've seen and read accounts of encounters all over Georgia and realized that I may have ran into Bigfoot or something else that day. In 1989, I was camping alone at a gold mine lake in Rockmart, Georgia. I heard a screeching call from the other side of the lake. I thought it was a wounded bobcat or a call from a bobcat that I had never heard before, but it was very loud and too throaty to be a cat that I know of. After hearing some of the audio examples of Sasquatch, it just might have been the call I heard. I'm not 100% sure, but it wasn't anything I could describe at the time. Today's third part of the upload. On Saturday, June 4th, 2011, at about 9:30 p.m., Rayanna Smith, Blake Bagley, and their young infant son were driving north on 6500 East, just north of Fort Duchesne, Utah, near Skinwalker Ranch, on their way to a friend's home for a quiet get-together. They were approaching a corner when, out of nowhere, a panicked cow burst from the undergrowth and ran directly in front of their car. Blake hit the brakes, but it was too late. The car hit the unfortunate cow head-on. Suddenly, the car's headlights picked up a large wolf-like creature approximately 6 feet tall that ran on 2 legs into the road next to the cow and continued running across the road in front of both astonished witnesses. Skinwalker Ranch investigators separated both witnesses and interviewed them individually. Both described the tall creature that had the head and shoulders of a German shepherd or wolf with dark brown or black long hair. The beast was running very easily and rapidly on 2 legs and passed within a couple of feet of the cow as it lay in the road. According to both witnesses, the creature was originally heading east to northwest in an apparent pursuit of the cow, but once in the headlights, then abruptly turned and ran southwest into the darkness. The couple promptly called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and BIA responded to the scene. The damaged vehicle was towed from the scene, and Skinwalker Ranch investigators confirmed the incident was recorded in the BIA blotter, although it was not assigned a report number. The couple were cooperative with the ranch researchers and brought them to the scene of the accident. A large stain was seen on the west side of the road, and multiple pieces of clear, yellow, and black plastic was recovered from the vicinity. These pieces were consistent with the grille and the front of the couple's damaged vehicle. No evidence or unusual footprints were found at the scene. This case, if taken on its own, would inspire skepticism in most people. However, beginning in 2008, dozens of cases involving dogmen walking on 2 legs were relayed to the Skinwalker Ranch investigators. Now let's consider this case that occurred just within a stone's throw from Skinwalker Ranch, sometime during the month of October 2008, at approximately 4 p.m., Lamar Oakes and his 16-year-old son Craig were in their backyard of the property that directly abuts to Skinwalker Ranch, both carrying .30-30s, and they were target practicing. Their pit bull was browsing nearby. Movement about 60 yards north of their location near a ravine where the creek caught Lamar's eyes. The animal was dark-colored and looked like a wild dog or a coyote, and both ranchers became concerned about an attack on their chickens, sheep, goat, and other livestock. Lamar and Craig took aim and fired, and both were certain that one shot had hit the animal. Then things became bizarre. Instead of the animal falling over, it stood up on its hind legs and looked deliberately at the astounded pair. The movement, according to Lamar, was intentional and graceful. Both eyewitnesses had a clear, unobstructed view of the animal. Both described a thin coyote or wolf-like creature with long, coarse, reddish hair, with regular, daw-like paws. The hind legs were angled and curved, and Lamar described the front legs as retracted towards the chest, like a kangaroo. The creature had a long, thick, bushy tail. Both men again raised their rifles, and the animal suddenly ran swiftly northward toward the creek. The pit bull took off in pursuit. The creature ran on 2 legs like a human, and was able to outpace the pit bull. Both father and son confirmed that the creature did not hop or jump like a dog, but ran like a human. The creature crossed the creek, and as Lamar and Craig approached the ravine, they could see the Dogman disappearing into a group of Russian olive trees. Today's 4th part of the upload. Hi, my name is Savannah, and I had an encounter that I feel like I need to share. I'm native to Northeast Georgia, and I've lived in the country my whole life. I've encountered about every type of animal you can think of, but never experienced what I'm about to share. My husband's family camps on a creek up near Lake Barton every summer. We decided to go camping in October of 2008 before our little one made her appearance. It's very isolated up there, as you have to drive about 30 minutes to the second and last campground before the trailhead at Addis Gap on the AP Trail. It's October, so our campsite and the other are the only ones occupied at the time. I was uncomfortable and couldn't sleep, so I rolled over and was watching the fire from the pop-up camper. As I watched, I saw something very large pass between the fire and the camper. It was on 2 legs, and it was huge. It went over to the truck and was snooping around, and our dog, who never meets a stranger and hardly barks or growls, started whining. I was scared, but brushed it off. Soon after that, up the hill on the opposite side of the road, I began to hear this knocking sound and all sorts of calls. I've heard coyotes call nightly, and it was no coyote. I proceeded to wake up my husband, but it stopped shortly after we began talking. During all of this, the other campers were up and blaring their radio and drinking. They even heard it and turned down their radio and actually turned it off completely. The next morning, they apologized for waking me and saw that I was up near the truck, and then asked me if I heard the howls. I told her I wasn't at the truck at all last night. Needless to say, I reported it to the camp host, and she acted like it was nothing. Some of her food was even missing the next morning, and it was things that bears couldn't get into without tearing up a bag that it was stored in. Like I said, I've been keeping this to myself. I just had this weird feeling for the rest of the trip and didn't go to the porta potties at night. Today's final part of the upload is something very interesting that I found and just wanted to share with you. In 1919, a number of Oklahoman newspapers published a terrifying story of a Canadian World War I veteran named Captain F.J. Newhouse. According to Newhouse, Allied soldiers in the trenches at Mons had found themselves hunted by a terrifying beast. It all started in 1914 when Captain Yesks of the London Fulsers took 4 soldiers out into no man's land on patrol. When they didn't return, their concerned comrades thought they might have been intercepted by the Germans. But days later, their dead bodies were found, just as they had been dragged down with teeth marks at their throats. From that point, things got worse. Terrible howls echoed across the landscape, and soldiers reported seeing strange movements beyond the barbed wire. Patrols into no man's land would be found horribly mauled, as if by some great beast. Then, just as sudden as it all had appeared, the creature seemed to disappear again. The mystery was only resolved when the German scientist was killed in Berlin riot at the end of the war. Apparently, some papers revealed a dastardly plot to transfer the madman's brain into a giant Siberian wolfhound, which was subsequently released into no man's land. This was part of a series of experiments that they hoped would end the war in Germans' favor. How even a very crazy dog was supposed to resolve the war remains unclear. Interestingly, Captain Newhouse seems to have been a real soldier, but otherwise the story falls apart quickly. For one thing, there is no record of a scientist named Golub Huchmaler, and there is definitely no Captain Yeskis in the London Fulsers. Yeskis is actually quite a rare name in England, although it's much more common in Canada and America, suggesting that F.J. Newhouse probably made the whole thing up. The Battle of Mons is also well known for a legend of Angels of Mons, in which angelic beings, most commonly in the form of medieval bowmen appeared to protect British soldiers. The legend started with a short story by horror author Arthur McKen, which appeared in the London Evening News in 1914. The story was written in the style of a newspaper report and wasn't adequately labeled as fiction, prompting many people to believe it was real. The story soon took on a life of its own, to the point of people refused to believe Mennick made it up. As Mennick wrote later, the snowball of rumor that was then rolling has been rolling ever since, growing bigger and bigger, till it is now swollen to its monstrous size. Well, okay, I just wanted to kind of point out on this one is I don't doubt that story, first of all, because in my eyes, I just think it's American propaganda trying to hide the fact that the Nazis had such capability to do crazy shit like they did. I mean, honestly, unfortunately, if it wasn't for the scientists of German World War era, we probably wouldn't have NASA, you know? So, I mean, they were crazy. They had the funds, they had the brilliance to do things like this. So, maybe, just maybe, the story's true. In my eyes, I really 100% believe it, because there's just too many other offshoot stories of World War I soldiers talking about this beast of Mons. So, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. And, I mean, how hard is it for the government to hide somebody? It's not hard at all. They do it every day. Have a great night, guys. Thanks for always listening. See ya!